Hey guys. Tonight we begin with the dirtiest square mile in 19th century America. Imagine an alley where daylight doesn't reach the ground, where the walls drip, and the language changes every few feet. Welcome to 5 Points the Bend, where Irish immigrants, freed slaves, and pickpockets shared the same 10 feet of air. A place that turned the word neighborhood into a warning. But from all that chaos came something else, the heartbeat of modern New York. So before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And be sure to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now, get comfortable. Let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You step off the cobblestones and into the curve of the city's spine, where everything seems slightly bent out of shape, like the street itself gave up on standing straight. The first thing you notice isn't the buildings, it's the air. It's thick, damp, and smells like someone boiled despair and forgot to put the lid back on. Somewhere beneath the rot, there's the faint sweetness of spilled gin, and that odd tang of coal smoke clinging to wet laundry. You inhale, cough, and wonder how anything survives here. Then you see that it does. Life moves in every direction at once. A cart rattles past, its wheels sinking into mud that was once a pond. A woman yells from an open window while beating a rug that probably fought back. Children run barefoot through puddles that have ambitions of becoming small lakes. Each corner holds an argument in progress, some about money, others about religion, and most about who gets the last potato. You take a few steps further, and the ground gives slightly beneath your boots. It's like walking over memory foam made of failure. The city tried to fill this place in years ago, to bury the pond and everything it represented, mosquitoes, muck, the wrong kind of people. But the earth remembers. It keeps breathing up the past, slow and stubborn. The buildings lean toward one another, crooked brick shoulders pressing close, as if sharing gossip. Laundry flaps above you in streaks of gray and off-white, though it's hard to tell if it's clean or just resigned. You hear a fiddle from somewhere deep in the alley, an offbeat melody that's half joy, half warning. The music threads through the chaos, mocking the city's attempts at order. A man in a vest too tight for him is shouting about oysters. Another, wearing what used to be a hat, is trying to sell fresh bread that has clearly lived a full life already. Behind them, a group of boys play something that might be cricket or might be organized violence. You can't tell who's winning, but it's definitely not the ball. You pass a tavern that smells like bad choices and worse liquor. Its sign reads, "The Copper Pot," though most of the letters have given up and fallen off. Inside, laughter bursts out a sound both alive and dangerous, like a spark in a gas leak. A drunk stumbles into the street, tips his hat at you, and announces proudly that he's never been sober enough to fall down. You're not sure if that's a boast or a medical condition. Farther down, a woman in a faded dress is arguing with a preacher. She's holding a bucket of water in the moral high ground. The preacher's holding a Bible and losing both the argument and his balance. When she dumps the bucket over his shoes, the crowd cheers. Someone starts clapping a rhythm against a wall, and for a moment, the street hums like it's alive because it is. You glance around and realize there's no real boundary between survival and spectacle here. Everything happens in public. Hunger, love, theft. They all share the same 10 feet of space. The city officials uptown call it a disgrace. But to everyone here, disgrace is just part of the weather. You adapt or you sink. As the sun dips behind the rooftops, the shadows crawl faster. Lamps flicker to life, their light weak and yellow, as if embarrassed to be seen. The streets take on that strange shimmer that happens when night and smoke mix a thin film that makes everything look both dreamlike and slightly sticky. Somewhere nearby, a woman starts singing. Her voice is rough, cracked, but it carries through the alleys like it knows its way home. You pause and listen. It's not a sad song, exactly. It's the kind of tune people sing when they've been sad so long it's turned into something else, something strong enough to laugh at itself. Around you, doors creak, bottles clink, and the city exhales. You realize then that 5 Points isn't a neighborhood, it's a living creature. It breathes, sweats, and occasionally bites. It's ugly, loud, and impossible to ignore. And somehow, against all odds, it feels honest. The rest of New York pretends to be civilized, but down here in the Bend, no one bothers with the act. You see it for what it is, raw humanity with the safety off. You keep walking, deeper into the curve, following the noise and the flicker of lamplight, knowing that once you've seen this place, the clean parts of the city will never look the same again. The ground squelches beneath you, a reminder that this entire neighborhood was once a pond pretending to be land. The city filled it in with dirt, bricks, and the collective optimism of people who clearly didn't test their work. They said it would be solid, permanent, respectable, but every step tells you otherwise. The earth still remembers being water, and it keeps trying to go back. It's like walking on a secret that refuses to stay buried. You imagine the day they covered it. Men with shovels and city officials with speeches, congratulating themselves on taming nature. They thought progress meant piling garbage high enough to build on. They probably toasted afterward, somewhere uptown, while the ground here quietly bubbled and plotted revenge. You look down now, and the mud still sweats through the cracks in the cobblestones like guilt. It's not just dirt, it's evidence. The bricks, when you look closely, don't match. Some are red, others brown, others the color of old liver. They came from anywhere someone was tearing something down. Entire walls were scavenged from half-collapsed buildings, repurposed in the name of thrift and haste. It's the architectural equivalent of patching a ship with chewing gum, but it worked well enough to cram people in, and that was the point. You can almost hear the city whispering, "We promised them homes. We didn't promise they'd stay standing." When it rains, the truth comes up to the surface. Water floods the basements first, then the hallways, and finally the streets. You picture mothers lifting their children onto tables, while fathers curse the landlord through the floorboards. The city inspectors stop by every few months, glance around, nod grimly, and declare the problem improving. You wonder if they mean the flooding or their ability to ignore it. At the heart of the Bend, there's a narrow passage that everyone calls the Trench. It's not an official name, it just describes the experience. The buildings are so close that you could borrow salt from your neighbor without opening your door. The walls sweat constantly, the bricks slick with humidity, and the air feels heavy enough to chew. You move slowly through it, stepping over discarded bottles and something that might once have been a shoe. Children dart around you like rats with better instincts. You spot a man, perched on an overturned crate, hammering nails into a plank that clearly isn't part of any plan. He catches your glance and grins. "Keeps the floor up," he says, as if that's a hobby. You nod, because here, holding the world together with bad wood and worse luck is a normal day's work. Every sound, the dripping, the coughing, the distant laughter has a rhythm to it, as if the entire slum is an orchestra of stubborn survival. You duck beneath a low archway where the mud turns slick again. It's darker here, and the ground gives way like it's sighing under your weight. The smell sharpens, wet stone, mildew, and faint traces of gin. You wonder how many broken promises lie beneath your boots. Each brick tells the same story: cheap labor, cheaper materials, and the unwavering belief that no one important will ever have to live here. A voice calls out from a window above, warning someone about a loose roof tile. A second later, the tile crashes into the street, shattering like punctuation on the end of her sentence. No one looks up. That's just how the Bend communicates through falling objects and implied threats. There's a strange beauty in it, though, in the way ruin holds itself together. The walls lean into each other like old friends, the puddles mirror bits of sky that don't belong here, and the bricks, chipped and scarred, still cling to one another despite everything. You think maybe the city didn't so much build this place as argue it into existence. You pause at the edge of an alley, where the mud deepens and the light thins. The earth below still remembers its first form. You can almost hear it, that quiet, sloshing defiance, the pond that refused to die, pushing back through brick and grime to remind the city that it never really won. The Bend breathes through its ground, and tonight, under your feet, it feels almost alive. You watch them panic from a safe distance, the men in pressed coats and polished shoes, clutching papers like shields. They're the architects of progress, or so they thought. But the blueprint didn't include what happens when progress gets drunk and wanders downtown. 5 Points was supposed to be temporary, a civic hiccup easily cured with a few regulations and a prayer. Instead, it grew teeth. You can almost hear the city gasping, trying to tidy up a mess it can't pronounce. Uptown meetings become a kind of theater. Committees gather, argue, and conclude nothing with great ceremony. They write long reports describing unsanitary conditions in language so delicate it sounds like poetry for mold. Maps are drawn with red lines and moral outrage. They call it reform. The Slum calls it Tuesday. You imagine the city's finest minds leaning over blueprints, wondering how a single neighborhood managed to outsmart them. The truth is, they built the American dream without a lock on the door. Immigrants poured in by the shipload, bringing hunger, faith, and an inconvenient tendency to multiply. The city, desperate to appear organized, stacked them into tenements faster than they could breathe. Bureaucracy smiled and signed the papers. Affordable housing, they said, as if that meant safe. The dream was simple. Work hard, stay sober, own a bit of land. But 5 Points doesn't deal in dreams. It trades in survival. You can almost picture the moment control slipped away. Maybe it was the day the first landlord realized he could divide a single room into 4 and still find tenants. Maybe it was when the police stopped patrolling after dark. Or maybe it was when someone realized that corruption wasn't a flaw, it was the only system that worked here. Laws don't reach the Bend. They sink in the mud before they get there. You pass a notice nailed to a post. City Sanitation Board, it declares. The irony smells stronger than the garbage pile beneath it. Somewhere, a reformer with shiny shoes once stood here, taking notes while trying not to touch anything. He probably wrote later about the need for moral uplift, unaware that the people he pitied were too busy trying not to drown in their basements. Up in City Hall, the tone shifts from concern to blame. Politicians call it a moral failure, as if the gutters caught cholera out of laziness. Newspaper headlines scream about urban decay while politely ignoring who built the city this way. You imagine them whispering, "If we just close our eyes hard enough, maybe the poor will relocate out of embarrassment." But the Bend doesn't move. It festers, it sings, it throws a bottle when necessary, but it stays. And that's the part that truly terrifies them. The slum keeps existing despite their best efforts. They can't pave over it, can't legislate it away, can't arrest an entire population for being inconvenient. The city's backbone bends here, and no one can straighten it. At night, the glow of gas lamps turns the alleys into crooked veins of light. You walk through, hearing laughter that doesn't sound defeated, just tired and practical. Somewhere, a fiddler plays the same 2 notes over and over, refusing to stop until someone dances. You realize that this is the real city, the one that doesn't make it onto postcards. The officials built the version they wanted people to see. 5 Points built the version that worked. You stop at the edge of an open lot, where rats hold their own town meetings. They seem more efficient than the human ones. Around you, the noise swells arguments. Babies, music, the clatter of ambition scraping by. It's chaos, but it's alive. Bureaucracy never stood a chance. The city lost control the way people lose their tempers slowly, then all at once. By the time it noticed, the damage had a mailing address and rent due every Friday. You stand there watching the lights flicker against the damp walls, and you understand, order was never the natural state of things here. The Bend doesn't need permission to exist. It just does, breathing in defiance, surviving in spite of every plan to make it disappear. You hear them before you see them. The dockside hums with the sound of 1,000 new beginnings, most of them coughing. Ships arrive heavy with hope and hunger, each one spilling pale, hollow-eyed families onto the wharf like someone tipped over a barrel of humanity. You watch them clutch small bundles, rosaries, and the last of their dignity. Their shoes are thin, their accents thick, and every step creaks with exhaustion. The Irish are here, and they are not going home. You can smell the salt still on them as they trudge inland, past the taverns and boarding houses that promise beds but deliver splinters. Some carry infants, others carry nothing but bad luck. They don't look like conquerors, but somehow they invade anyway, flowing through New York's narrow streets until they hit the bottom of the city's stomach. 5 points. The Bend takes them in, the way a fire takes kindling. Within days, they're everywhere. The women scrub laundry in alleys, knuckles raw and faces streaked with soot. The men swing pickaxes, haul bricks, dig trenches, and curse their way through jobs no one else will take. They sleep 6 to a room, stacked like kindling, and wake before dawn to do it again. And yet, somehow, they laugh. You can't tell if it's defiance or delirium, but it's contagious. The city above sneers at them. Newspapers call them savages, drunks, and thieves. Cartoonists draw them with monkey faces and whiskey bottles. Politicians call them a plague. But when the sewers need digging, or the rail lines need laying, suddenly everyone forgets the insults. The Irish are useful, if expendable. A contractor can lose 3 in a day and still turn a profit. The dead are mourned with a drink, a song, and sometimes a fist fight if the whiskey's strong enough. At night, the taverns become cathedrals. Inside the haze of pipe smoke and spilled beer, the air hums with fiddle music and slurred blessings. You push open the door of one and are instantly part of it. The laughter, the shouting, the clatter of mugs. The stories are all the same. The land they left, the ship they barely survived, the boss who pays in promises. But they tell them like legends, polishing each misery until it shines. Someone toasts to St. Patrick. Someone else toasts to rent being due next week and ignored anyway. The line between despair and celebration blurs completely after the 3rd round. Outside, the streets pulse with new energy. The Irish bring their own saints, their own songs, their own brand of chaos. They fill the churches, the labor halls, the jails. They marry young, argue loudly, and hold grudges with religious devotion. They turn poverty into community, as if sheer noise could keep the darkness out. And it almost works. But the Bend doesn't make room easily. The old residents, freedmen, Germans, a few Dutch stragglers, watch the flood with wary eyes. Tensions rise like steam from the cobblestones. A shove here, a slur there, and soon the whole street is a powder keg waiting for a spark. You hear the fights before you see them, the shouts, the breaking glass, the strange rhythm of rage set to the beat of a drum somewhere nearby. The Irish learn quickly. They form gangs, unions, churches, anything that feels like armor. They trade favors, fists, and occasionally bullets. You see it happening in real time, the way desperation crystallizes into loyalty. Out of the mud comes identity. Out of the noise, pride. They stop being strangers and start being a force, one the city can't quite control or ignore. You stand on the corner as another ship unloads. New faces, same story. A priest blesses them. A landlord counts them. and a pickpocket welcomes them to America by relieving one of his coins. The system hums along perfectly. By nightfall, half will be in 5 points, looking for work, a meal, or a miracle, whichever comes first. In the distance, you hear another fiddle start up, scratchy and defiant. It sounds like laughter with an edge. The music carries down the crooked streets and into the damp rooms where people are still awake, talking about how next week will be better, how the landlord will finally fix the leak, how someday they'll own a piece of land with a door that locks. For now, they have this mud, gin, and the stubborn will to keep going. You look around and realize that, for all its filth and fury, 5 Points has never felt more alive. The Irish didn't just arrive, they changed the rhythm of the city itself. And the city, despite itself, begins to tap its foot. You hear the sound before you see the people. It's a low hum rising from the cracks of the bend drums tapped on barrels, laughter punctuated by the clatter of a washboard, and somewhere, the faint shuffle of feet turning rhythm into rebellion. The free black community of 5 Points doesn't just survive here, it creates. Amidst the stink and the shouting, they build something resembling dignity, piece by piece, as if the act itself is defiance. You pass a courtyard where a woman in a worn shawl sings while hanging laundry, her voice clear enough to make the drunks stop pretending not to listen. Her notes glide through the alleyways, bounce off the bricks, and find a home inside anyone who still remembers what freedom is supposed to feel like. Around her, children chase each other between lines of clothes, their laughter sharp and bright against the gloom. For a moment, you could almost forget the filth. Almost. But peace doesn't last long here. Just across the street, Irish laborers glare from a stoop, passing a bottle and muttering about stolen jobs. The city threw the desperate into one pot and stirred hard. The Irish arrived with famine still in their bones, the freedmen with freedom barely earned, and both were told there wasn't enough room for dignity to go around. You can feel the tension hum in the air, thick as the summer stink. The slightest insult becomes an explosion, waiting for an excuse. Yet somehow, the same streets that breed suspicion also birth something strange and new. You hear it one-night music leaking from a backroom tavern where an Irish fiddler trades melodies with a black percussionist. It starts awkwardly, like two languages arguing. But slowly, rhythm finds its footing. The bow slides, the drum answers, and the room leans in. The crowd begins to sway, half in disbelief, half in delight. By the third song, the noise outside drowns in the sound of something that shouldn't work but does. In daylight, things are less poetic. You watch a group of black dock workers unload crates under the eyes of a foreman who doesn't bother hiding his sneer. They move with the practiced efficiency of people who've learned to do twice the labor for half the pay. The Irish crew next to them works just as hard, cursing just as loud. And every now and then the two groups exchange insults sharp enough to draw blood. It's not personal, not really. It's exhaustion turned outward, anger passed down like inheritance. The newspapers, of course, love it. They write about violent races and degenerate districts, as if poverty itself were contagious. You picture the uptown readers nodding solemnly over breakfast, spooning sugar into coffee while tisk-tisking at the savages below. No one writes about the families who share food across hallways, or the nights when a drunk is carried home by the same men he swore were his enemies. The truth doesn't sell papers. Still, culture grows here like weeds in the cracks. Churches appear in basements, schools in spare rooms, and dance halls in places where permits dare not tread. You hear sermons laced with fire and laughter, see children learning letters scrawled in chalk on broken walls. Every act of creation feels like theft from the jaws of chaos, and somehow that makes it sweeter. One evening, as you walk along Orange Street, a crowd gathers around a group of dancers. Bare feet slap against the wooden boards, each step a conversation between drumbeat and heartbeat. The Irish lads clap along, then join in, their shoes adding metallic rhythm to the mix. The crowd roars, the music grows wilder, and suddenly all that tension burns off in motion. What was once rivalry becomes rhythm. What was hate becomes art. By the time the song ends, the crowd has forgotten who started it. You stand among them, the sweat and laughter blending into the humid air. For a heartbeat, 5 points doesn't feel divided. It feels alive, messy, loud, unrefined, but alive in a way the rest of the city could never understand. You walk away knowing that, beneath the grime and prejudice, something powerful is taking shape. Not harmony exactly, but something close enough to make the walls shake. The street hums with mistrust, yes, but also with melody. And for once, it sounds like possibility. You take the turn where the city bends, like it's trying to hide something. The buildings lean inward, stooped and crooked, their roofs slouching as if gossiping about whoever's unlucky enough to pass through. The bend isn't marked on most maps, not accurately anyway. It's not the kind of place cartographers linger. You can feel it in the air before you see it. The smell, damp wood, stale gin, and something vaguely biological hangs low and thick, like the neighborhood itself is exhaling into your lungs. You walk slow, not by choice, but because the street makes you. It curves in a way that confuses your sense of direction and your sense of safety. Light barely touches the ground here, filtered through layers of hanging laundry, smoke, and time. You glance up and see faces peering down from broken windows. None of them smile. They just watch, quiet and unblinking, as if waiting to see whether you belong or how long before you trip. Children run past, barefoot, darting through puddles that have never known clean water. Their laughter is sharp and brief, like it's rationed. A woman at a doorway wrings out a rag and slaps it against a bucket, humming under her breath. Her knuckles are cracked, her eyes dull but alert. You get the feeling she could identify every drunk, thief, and policeman in a 2-block radius just by the sound of their footsteps. Every house here looks exhausted, bricks sag under their own weight, and stairways lean like they've been drinking. The wooden porches are warped and soft. When someone steps on one, it moans. Whole families live inside rooms that used to be closets. You pass one window and catch sight of a dinner table, a plank balanced on 2 crates, surrounded by faces lit by candlelight. The flame trembles, and for a second, the room looks almost holy. Then a rat scurries across the sill, and the illusion breaks. The streets are alive, but not in the way a city should be. This place twitches. It breathes unevenly. A fight breaks out near the corner over something invisible, maybe pride, maybe bread. The crowd barely reacts. They've seen better brawls before breakfast. Someone laughs from a second-floor window, not cruelly, just knowingly, like it's all part of the routine. You can't tell if it's tragedy or theater anymore. You stop near a lamppost that flickers as if unsure it wants to keep existing. The post leans, like everything else here, pointing nowhere in particular. On the wall beside it, graffiti spells out a message half faded by weather. The city forgot us. It feels less like a complaint and more like a fact. You can almost picture the city above, pretending places like this don't exist, while the Bend sits here, quietly proving them wrong. A man shuffles past, coat torn at the seams, hat too big for his head. He tips it anyway, manners surviving where everything else has decayed. Behind him, 2 boys haul a barrel of something that sloshes and smells like rot. They whistle as they go, off-key but determined. There's a rhythm to life here, clumsy, grim, but undeniably alive. You reach the curve itself, the spot that earned the name. The street dips and twists, forming a crescent of misery that seems to swallow sound. The walls on both sides almost meet at the top, letting in just enough light to remind you what darkness looks like. It's easy to see why preachers call it cursed and reformers call it hopeless. But when you listen closely, you hear something else music. A fiddle from somewhere inside, soft and stubborn, keeping time against the heartbeat of the street. The Bend is ugly, yes, but it's honest. There's no pretense, no polished civility. Everyone here knows the game, survive, and maybe laugh while doing it. You realize the city's shame isn't the filth or the crime, it's that this place still breathes after everything done to kill it. You take one last look at the curve of the street, the leaning houses whispering to one another. The light fades completely now, swallowed by the bend of the walls. You keep walking, half certain that if you turned around, the street might not even be there anymore, just a shadow where New York hides its conscience. They move in packs, small and fast, like smoke with dirty faces. The children of the Bend don't wait for permission to exist. They simply do. Barefoot armies swarm through puddles that reflect nothing but grime and sky, weaving between barrels, carts, and half-dead dogs. You can hear them before you see them: shouts, laughter, the slap of feet against cobblestone, a language of chaos older than the city itself. They are tiny empires, self-governing, wildly disorganized, and always hungry. You meet them in the market first, or what passes for one, a sprawl of stalls that sell everything from bruised apples to items that were definitely stolen earlier this morning. A boy with hair sticking out like straw calls you governor and smiles with too many missing teeth. He can't be more than 9, but his eyes already carry the weight of 10 hard winters. He offers to guard your boots, which of course means he'll steal them the second you look away. You decline, and he shrugs like it's your loss. Further down, 2 girls argue over a slice of bread that looks older than both of them combined. Their fight is theatrical, complete with insults worthy of playwrights, until an older kid steps in and snatches the bread for himself. No one cries. The girls curse him in perfect unison, then burst out laughing. They laugh like they've never heard of tomorrow, and maybe they haven't. Tomorrow costs more than they can afford. They work, too, in their own ways. Shoe shiners, errand runners, pickpockets, and messengers for anyone with coin or something shinier. You watch a boy no taller than your waist vanish into a crowd, then reappear minutes later with an apple and a grin. He takes a bite and offers you the core like a gesture of goodwill. For him, generosity is measured in what's left. You catch sight of a group playing in the gutter, their version of stickball involving a plank of wood and something that might once have been a hat. Their cheers echo through the narrow street, rising above the grind of wagon wheels and the distant groan of the tenements. The game pauses when a constable appears. The children scatter instantly, melting into cracks and corners like water. By the time the man looks up, the street is empty again. The Bend always protects its own. At night, you see them curled up in doorways, huddled together under torn blankets. They share warmth the way others share secrets. A few hum tunes learned from their parents, tunes that sound too old for such young throats. You imagine what their dreams might look like. Food, maybe, or the vague idea of a roof that doesn't leak, or maybe they don't dream at all. Maybe the day takes enough out of them that sleep is just a small mercy. There's a girl you notice near Mulberry Bend Park, sweeping the same patch of street every evening for pennies. She moves with the grace of someone who refuses to give up the act of caring. When she finishes, she sits on her broom and watches the sunset glint off broken glass. For a few seconds, the light makes everything look almost beautiful, and she smiles at the illusion as if she knows it's borrowed time. They learn fast, these children, faster than any school could teach. They know which streets flood first, which drunks to avoid, which cops will look the other way for a coin. They navigate the maze of alleys with the precision of generals. You realize that while adults are busy drowning in whiskey and sermons, these kids are writing their own rules. They live on instincts, humor, and luck, and somehow it's enough. Every so often, a reformer comes through a woman in a starched collar or a man with a podiment, clipboard, and optimism. They hand out pamphlets and prayers talking about saving the children of the slums. The children smile, take the handouts, and vanish before the ink dries. They don't need saving. They need food, warmth, and a world that isn't built to forget them. As you leave the bend, you glance back and see them again darting through the shadows, quick as sparks. They are filthy, loud, and untamed, yet they carry a kind of light the city's polished streets never will. You realize they don't just belong to the bend, they are the bend, the living proof that even in the dirtiest corners of the world, life still finds a way to laugh. You step inside and the first thing that hits you is the smell. It's a complicated bouquet: boiled cabbage, kerosene, mildew, and the faint suggestion of something that once aspired to be meat. The hallway is narrow enough to make you turn sideways, and the wallpaper, what's left of it, clings to the wall like it's afraid of being evicted. You can hear everything: babies crying, someone coughing deep and wet, a violin practicing 2 floors above. Privacy isn't a luxury here, it's a myth. The tenement feels alive, though not in a comforting way. It breathes. The floors creak, the walls groan, and the pipes rattle like bones in a coffin. You touch the railing as you climb the stairs, then instantly wish you hadn't. Every surface is sticky with a history you can't quite identify. Somewhere behind a door, a man yells something in Irish, answered by a woman who clearly isn't impressed. Their argument weaves seamlessly into the rhythm of the building, another note in its endless hum. Each door you pass hides an entire world compressed into a single room. You peek through one half-open doorway and see a family of 6 eating dinner around a stove the size of a hatbox. The mother ladles soup from a dented pot while 2 toddlers chase each other around a sleeping grandfather. The air is thick, enough to chew. You could count the oxygen molecules on one hand. Yet despite the claustrophobia, there's laughter. Real laughter, loud and defiant. It's almost obscene how alive they seem in a place built for decay. You move on, deeper into the maze. The floors tilt just enough to make you uneasy, and the ceiling leaks in polite intervals, a slow and steady drizzle that smells faintly of rust. A tenant has placed a bucket beneath the drip, half full already. The sound of each drop becomes a metronome for survival. You realize this building is less a home and more a trap that people refuse to leave because outside is worse. You meet a boy on the stairs, no older than 10, carrying a bucket of coal and looking like he's been 40 for most of his life. He stops, shifts the weight, and tells you that if you go up 2 more flights, you'll find the room with the rats that don't bite. He says it like it's a selling point. You thank him, and he shrugs, already moving. Again, childhood doesn't linger here, it hustles. On the top floor, the air feels heavier, as if gravity has more enthusiasm up here. The windows are too small to open and too cracked to close. You pass a door slightly ajar and catch a glimpse of a woman sitting beside a cot. She's humming softly, rocking something wrapped in a blanket that's too still. You move past quietly, because grief here is private, even when the walls are not. Somewhere nearby, a baby starts crying, a sound that cuts through the building like a blade. The cry is met by a burst of shouting from the hall, a curse, a door slam, then silence. The tenement settles again into its rhythm: cough, drip, shuffle, wheeze. You realize the building doesn't sleep. It just rests between arguments. The landlord, you're told, lives uptown. He visits once a month to collect rent, escorted by 2 policemen and the smug confidence of someone who's never climbed these stairs at night. He promises repairs next quarter, and the tenants nod politely, knowing that quarter means never. Yet every room stays full. The poor don't move out. They multiply. You pause by a window that overlooks the alley. Below, laundry hangs limp between buildings, strips of faded fabric fluttering like surrender flags. A woman empties a pot out the window, and you step back just in time to avoid finding out what was in it. The air outside isn't much fresher, but at least it's free. You take one last look around before stepping back into the street. Behind you, the building sighs, releasing heat and despair through every crack. It looms there, grim and patient, a mausoleum for the living. You realize why they call them tenement tombs. People don't just live here, they endure, stacked like stories the city refuses to read again. You learn the anatomy of a riot the way you learn to read here, by listening for the tiny sounds before the shout. It begins like any bad decision, a word, a look, a bottle, clinking too close to a jaw. Someone calls another a name meant to wound nationality, color, or the one about a woman, and the insult lands like a stone in still water. It makes a ring, and then another, and suddenly everyone's ears are wet with attention. People stop pretending they're minding their own business. They fold into the drama because drama pays better than rent tonight. There's always whiskey involved, as if alcohol were the city's preferred accelerant. A man elbows his way past a group, throat rough from work and worse sleep, and a tavern hand thrusts a mug into his hand, like a peace offering that doubles as a fuse. He drinks. It burns. He slurs. Someone else laughs. The laugh is sharp. It sounds like the click of a match. Hands go from elbows to fists faster than sermons can be offered at the mission across the street. Gangs are professional about this sort of thing. They scout like weathermen, reading the pressure in the air, knowing when a quarrel will stay a quarrel, and when it will bloom into chaos. The Bowery boys favor neat lines and swagger. The dead rabbits prefer tangled, enthusiastic violence. They sharpen rhetoric as much as they sharpen knives. A scuffle at a pub becomes a sectional riot when a member recognizes a rival and then realizes there are a dozen of him. You can feel the crowd pulse, a body that decides to move as one because moving as one is safer than being singled out. Then come the props. Bottles are first, because they're handy and dramatic. The first one sails through the air like a small comet and finds a jaw or a window. Glass shatters in slow, beautiful explosions that set the soundtrack tink, crash, then the quicker drums of feet. Bricks are brought out deliberately, like someone would show up to a duel with the proper equipment. A stack of cobbles becomes ammunition. A loose plank becomes a shield. Fire is rare but decisive. A barrel tipped, a torch lit, and suddenly the night is in color, tongues of orange that make everyone feel important by association. You notice how quickly morality makes way for survival. People who'd preach the loudest about order 3 streets over pull their loved ones back into doorways and listen for the sound of boots. The priests and reformers who came earlier with pamphlets and soup disappear when the mob grows teeth charity. It turns out, has a very weak backbone. The police arrive later than you'd like. Their uniforms are supposed to be armor, but in a crowd that size, armor is only an invitation to be pushed. They try formation once, twice, then they fall back, because formation only works if your opponents believe in rules. In the Bend, rules are suggestions, unpopular and easily ignored. Riot is social theater with rotten props and high stakes. It gives everyone a role: victim, avenger, thief, peacemaker. You find yourself assigned without audition, pulled into a chorus line of survival. If you can throw, you throw. If you can run, you run. If you can hide, you hide. Someone starts a chant, simple and vicious, and the chant becomes a ritual, letting people anchor their fear into something communal. It's easier to be furious in a crowd than alone. Fury is warm. It makes the cold and hunger feel like small things. And there are always witnesses who profit. Shoemakers who sell patched boots for the runners. Tavern owners who brandish chairs like battle swords and collect for repairs. Saloon keepers who count coins while the windows fill with smoke. Violence is bad for the soul, but excellent for certain ledgers. You begin to understand why the city sometimes looks the other way. Chaos lubricates commerce if you own the right ledger. After the first wave, the riot learns its own language. It staggers, it reforms, it redirects. It might start over a drunken insult and finish over a grudge settled with a stolen watch. Sometimes it ends as quickly as it began. Fugitives vanish into alleys. Policemen tally losses and mothers gather children like fishermen hauling nets. Other times, it ends with a new law in the papers and a new promise from the city, equal parts headline and performative sorrow. The Bend eats the headlines and keeps the scars. When the morning comes and ash settles on laundry lines, you walk the streets looking for familiar faces. Some are gone: hospital beds, jail cells, coffins, whatever storage of the city happens to have room. The people who remain sweep broken glass into neat piles, as if the act of cleaning might glue the night back together. They talk quietly about the fight, as if it were a weather report: how long it lasted, who got in, what was taken. They list names like survivors list scars. Riot is what you get when the city's promises are overdue and the people inside the Bend stop waiting. It's loud, stupid, glorious, and terrible. It is, in its own chaotic way, honest. It tells you more about the place than any report ever will. You've watched it bloom and flail, and when it's over, you realize the true cost isn't the broken windows or the missing goods. It's the slow erosion of trust that the nightly drunk resolders back together with jokes and stale bread. The Bend never stays quiet for long. It only pretends to be. The night doesn't begin so much as erupt. Somewhere between the end of work and the start of forgetting, the doors of the tavern swing open and spill noise into the street. Fiddles screech, drums answer, and before you know it, the whole of 5 Points is moving. It isn't elegance. Not yet. It's something raw, half-born, scraped out of exhaustion and joy. The rhythm doesn't come from instruments alone. It comes from the stomping of boots, the slapping of heels against wooden floors warped by humidity and spilled ale. You don't plan to join in, but your foot betrays you. It starts tapping on its own, and there's no point fighting it. Inside a dim saloon, the air vibrates, with sound and sweat. An Irish fiddler saws through a tune like he's trying to punish the strings for something personal. Across the room, a black musician answers with a drum, his hands finding spaces in the melody that weren't there before. It shouldn't fit, but somehow it does. The rhythm shifts, quickens, and suddenly the two styles crash into one another, not in conflict, but in discovery. A crowd forms around them, cheering, clapping, stomping, turning chaos into choreography. You realize what you're watching isn't just entertainment, it's invention. The sound is new, wild, full of accident. Heels strike, toes flick. Boots scrape the floor in syncopation that feels like laughter at the city itself. No one knows it yet. But this is where tap dance is born, right here in the stink and noise, between spilled whiskey and shared poverty. It's an art form raised in a place that barely allows breathing room. Proof that even misery keeps rhythm when given half a chance. The dancers move like they're trying to outpace hunger. A woman in a frayed skirt spins, her feet slapping out perfect time, while a drunk shouts that she's got lightning in her shoes. The crowd agrees, pounding on tables, demanding another round of music, another excuse to forget that morning always comes. For now, there is only motion, the kind that feels like rebellion disguised as celebration. You step outside for air that doesn't exist. The streets are vibrating too. On stoops and corners, people dance to their own versions of the beat, mixing steps brought from Africa, Ireland, and everywhere in between. It's unplanned and unstoppable. A child mimics a grown man's steps and adds a twist that makes the adults laugh. Someone beats rhythm on a barrel. Someone else keeps time with a broom handle on the cobblestones. The music spills into every crack of the Bend, flooding even the corners where silence used to live. And yet, beneath the laughter, you sense the edge of something sharp. The joy here is frantic, like a candle burning too close to the wick. The same people dancing tonight will be fighting or starving by week's end. The same heels tapping out clever beats will be running from police or debt collectors. But for a few hours, the whole slum lifts itself above reality, defying it through rhythm. You can almost believe this music could save them all, if it only played long enough. Inside again, The fiddler and the drummer are sweating through their shirts, locked in an unspoken duel that's become something like friendship. The crowd moves as one body, stomping the floor until dust rains down from the rafters. You feel the boards tremble under your boots and think they might collapse, but no one stops. Collapse is just another part of the dance. Someone passes a bottle your way. You take a sip. It tastes like turpentine and courage, and hand it off. Around you, faces blur into one another, grinning, shouting, shining with the kind of joy that only exists when there's nothing left to lose. You realize then that this isn't distraction. It's survival. It's art made out of desperation, a rhythm loud enough to drown out the hunger rumbling beneath it. When the music finally slows, it's not because anyone wants it to. It just runs out of stamina, like the night itself. The fiddler lowers his bow, the drummer wipes his hands, and for a heartbeat, silence fills the room like a held breath. Then someone laughs, a sound so big it feels like a victory. You step back into the cool night and hear the echoes of it: boots, laughter, music fading into the distance. 5 points, against all logic, is still dancing on the edge of ruin. They stand on corners like prophets who missed the memo that no one's listening. From crates, barrels, and wobbly chairs, the street preachers of 5 points cry out to a population too busy staying alive to worry about eternity. You hear them everywhere, voices rising above, the noise of wagons and arguments, promising redemption louder than the taverns promise escape. Some wave Bibles, some wave fists, and some just wave wildly, as if trying to physically grab souls before they disappear into the saloon across the street. Salvation here is cheap, technically speaking. A preacher's sermon costs nothing, though most expect a coin for their trouble. The whiskey next door, on the other hand, costs a few cents more but guarantees results. You watch men weigh the options, glance at the sky, and head for the bottle. God may offer eternal life, but whiskey offers 15 blessed minutes of forgetting. In the Bend, that's practically a miracle. The preachers themselves are a strange breed, half believers, half showmen. There's one old man who sets up near Paradise Square every evening, a wiry figure in a coat 2 sizes too large. His voice carries like a cracked trumpet, warning that the end is near. Judging by the smell of the street, it probably is. He points to the crowd, naming sins as if he's reading a menu. When he shouts, "Drunkenness," 3 men in the back raise their bottles like they're toasting him. He pretends not to see. Then there's Sister Abigail, a woman with a voice that could stop traffic if 5 points had anything as organized as traffic. She preaches outside the gin mill, right where the drunks stumble out. Her hat is enormous, her Bible heavier than it needs to be, and her conviction ironclad. She quotes scripture, shakes her finger, and somehow still sells more prayers than the tavern sells gin. Her trick? She sings between sermons. Even sinners pause for music. But not all the voices speak of heaven. Some sell revolution. On the next corner, a firebrand with wild hair and the eyes of a man who's seen too much stands on an upturned crate. He doesn't talk about God. He talks about rent, hunger, and the men who get rich off both. His words ripple through the crowd like sparks in sawdust. "They call you lazy," he shouts, "but you built their railroads and cleaned their gutters." People cheer, fists rise, and for a moment, hope sounds like an argument waiting to happen. The authorities call these men agitators. The crowd calls them entertainment. The truth is, they're both. The Bend doesn't distinguish much between sermon, speech, or scam. Anyone with lungs and conviction can draw a following. You've seen it happen. Someone climbs a barrel, starts shouting, and before long, 50 people stop to listen. By the end, half are shouting back, half are crying, and one is picking pockets under the cover of piety. You notice that even when no one listens, the preachers keep talking. Maybe it's faith, maybe habit, or maybe the noise itself is comfort. Words fill the cracks where silence might creep in, and silence is dangerous. Here it makes people think. The sermons are less about saving souls and more about keeping despair at bay. You can almost believe it works, at least until the next riot or rent day. Night falls, and the street turns into a tug-of-war between redemption and relapse. The preacher's voice competes with fiddle music spilling from the taverns. "Repent," he bellows, while a drunk across the street slurs, "Tomorrow." The drunk wins, he usually does. But as you walk away, you catch a glimpse of a woman pausing at the edge of the preacher's circle. She listens, just for a moment, then drops a penny into his tin cup before disappearing into the dark. Maybe she believes. Maybe she just likes the sound of hope, even when it's out of tune. The firebrand's voice fades too, swallowed by laughter and argument. By midnight, the sermons are over, and only the faint echo of them lingers between the alleys. You realize that in 5 points, faith isn't a church or a doctrine. It's just another hustle, one that smells slightly better than the others. But it's still something. A voice in the chaos, shouting into the night, trying to convince the forgotten that they're not beyond saving, even if they stopped believing that a long time ago. You meet them in the steam rising from washtubs, in the narrow alleys where voices bounce off the bricks and into the night. The women of the Bend are everywhere, laundresses with arms like iron, midwives who've seen too much to be shocked, and others who work under red lamplight, trading tenderness like it's just another form of currency. They are the backbone of the chaos, the only thing standing between the Bend and complete collapse, though they'd never call it that. They just call it Tuesday. You watch a laundress slap a shirt against a washboard like it personally insulted her. Soap suds cling to her forearms, water dark with dirt and survival. Her name might be Bridget or Mary. Half the women here are named one or the other, but her story is carved in calluses. She works 14 hours a day, then carries the bundle home through streets that spit at her. She hums while she works, some tune older than memory, and every so often stops to yell at the neighbor's kid for stealing her clothespins. Respectability is a luxury. Clean clothes are a triumph. Next door lives Mrs. Delaney, the midwife, who moves like she's perpetually late for a birth, which, most of the time, she is. She's been delivering babies here for 20 years, sometimes in rooms so small she has to crouch beside the bed and hope the roof doesn't leak. She's the closest thing to a doctor this neighborhood gets. She's baptized newborns with gin when the water wasn't clean, and stitched wounds with thread meant for mending socks. The city inspectors hate her, the priests condemn her, but when the pain starts, no one calls anyone else. Then there are the women who step out after dark, corsets loosened, smiles painted on like armor. They linger near the taverns, under gaslights that make every face look both beautiful and tragic. Their laughter is bright but brittle, like glass that knows it's about to break. You hear them joke with the drunks, flirt with the brave, and curse the cheap. They call themselves working girls because they are, in every sense that counts. The city calls them immoral. The city also calls them when no one's looking. You notice that all of them, laundress, midwife, nightwalker, move with the same rhythm. Constant motion, never waiting, never wasting. The Bend eats stillness. A woman who stops moving here is either sick, arrested, or gone. You ask one of them, a red-haired girl leaning in a doorway, what keeps her in this place? She smirks, takes a drag of her cigarette, and says, "Rent's cheaper than heaven." Behind the tenement walls, they form small armies of survival. Neighbors trade favors like currency. A midwife delivers a child for free, and the mother sends her oldest to fetch coal next week. A laundress shares her soap, and someone else passes her a bottle on Sunday. Gossip doubles as intelligence: who's sick, who's missing, who's safe. It's not friendship, exactly. It's alliance by necessity, and it's stronger than law. You catch sight of a few rare moments of peace. Women sitting on stoops after dark, skirts hiked to their knees, sharing bread and cheap gin. laughing in that tired way that belongs only to people who've worked too hard to stop. Their conversation drifts from children to landlords to the size of the rats in their basements. One swears she saw a rat wearing a hat. No one doubts her. They laugh until the laughter hurts, and then they fall silent, watching the street like it might answer back. And through it all, they endure the judgment of a city that pretends not to need them. Reformers write pamphlets about their sins, preachers shout about their souls, and photographers sneak through alleys to capture their misery in perfect black and white. But those pictures never catch the sound of their laughter, the weight of their hands, or the quiet pride of surviving another day in a place that shouldn't allow it. You leave the Bend that night with their voices still echoing in your head. Not words exactly, just tones. The cadence of work and wit, the kind that keeps whole neighborhoods alive when hope runs out. These women don't get statues or songs. They get up tomorrow, just like today, ready to scrub, stitch, curse, and keep the city from collapsing under its own hypocrisy. They are the pulse under the grime, the heart that beats even when no one's listening. You hear them before you see them. Boots echo off the walls of the Bend, that rhythmic, swaggering march that tells you trouble isn't coming, it's already here, and collecting admission at the door. The gangs of 5 Points don't just live here. They are the neighborhood's personality made flesh and fists. The Bowery Boys, the Dead Rabbits, the Roach Guards, the Plug Uglies, names that sound like jokes until you realize how sharp their humor cuts. Each one wears loyalty like a uniform and pride like a weapon. The Bowery Boys fancy themselves patriots, though their version of patriotism comes with brass knuckles. They're nativists, self-appointed defenders of real Americans, which is rich considering most of their grandfathers got off the same boats as the people they now want to chase out. They dress sharp, slick their hair high, and talk politics between brawls. You spot a few of them on a corner, laughing too loud, sleeves rolled up to show off tattoos that look like they were inked by someone who'd never seen skin before. Their leader, broad-shouldered and perpetually chewing something, is holding court about the upcoming election, by which he means which candidate pays their tab at the saloon. Across the way, the Dead Rabbits gather in smaller groups, quieter but more dangerous for it. They move with a kind of coiled patience, the kind that knows better than to waste words. Irish through and through, they wear tattered coats and carry the kind of rage that doesn't need an invitation. The Rabbits aren't organized in the way newspapers make them sound. They're more like a family, bound by shared hunger and insult. Their enemies call them savages. Their friends call them survivors. It's politics, religion, and survival all tangled together until no one remembers which came first. A vote is worth a drink. A fight is worth a night's bragging rights. And a riot is just democracy with better lighting. You walk down Mulberry Street and see the divide play out in real time. The Bowery Boys shouting about American values. The Rabbits shouting about rent, both accusing the other of ruining the city, while the city quietly ruins them all. The clashes are almost ritualistic. It starts with an insult, a shove, and suddenly the street fills with men swinging sticks, bricks, and occasionally each other. Windows break, hats fly, and someone always ends up in the gutter insisting he won. It's violent, yes, but there's also something absurd about it, like a neighborhood theater troupe where every performance ends with someone missing a tooth. By morning, they'll be back in the same taverns, nursing bruises and buying rounds for the same people they fought hours before. The police try to intervene, but their allegiance is flexible. Half are on the take, the other half are drunk. You watch an officer stand between two mobs and then step aside with the kind of shrug that says, "This isn't my circus." And maybe it isn't. Maybe it's just 5 Points being itself loud, divided, ungovernable. You find yourself watching a fight unfold near Paradise Square. A Bowery Boy swings a club at a rabbit who ducks, counterpunches, and both of them end up laughing like idiots. Someone shouts that the mayor's men are coming, and just like that, the crowd scatters. The fight evaporates, replaced by normal street noise. Vendors, music. The faint echo of boots fading into another alley. You'd think it was over, but the energy lingers, thick in the air, ready to spark again the next time someone looks at someone the wrong way. And yet, beneath the chaos, there's a strange order. The gangs enforce their own rules. Don't steal from your neighbors, don't hit women, and don't forget where you came from. The city government barely functions down here, but somehow the gangs do. They protect their blocks, settle disputes, and make sure no one dies without someone to curse their name. It's brutal, crude justice, but it's justice nonetheless. As night falls, you see both sides retreat into their respective territories. The Bowery boys sing patriotic songs until they forget the words. The dead rabbits drink in silence, eyes fixed on the door, waiting for the next round. The lamps flicker, the air hums, and you realize 5 points doesn't belong to any one group. It belongs to the fight itself, the endless, ridiculous, necessary brawl that keeps the city's blood moving. Tomorrow, they'll all wake up with swollen faces, shaky hands, and another reason to start again. In the Bend, identity isn't just what you're born with. It's what you can defend with your fists. You watch the exchange like everyone else out of the corner of your eye, with the practiced indifference of people who know better than to notice. The officer stands at the corner, his uniform crisp, his badge gleaming like it actually means something. A shopkeeper slips him a folded bill under the guise of shaking his hand. It's smooth, almost elegant. The officer pockets it without breaking conversation. He even smiles. The crowd nearby pretends they didn't see a thing. In 5 points, justice doesn't walk a beat, it strolls, stops for coffee, and occasionally forgets to come back. Law here isn't about right or wrong. It's about rent, reputation, and timing. The cops don't so much patrol as circulate, their routes conveniently aligning with whoever's paying them this week. You see it in their eyes, the calculation, the casual way they measure worth before deciding whether to protect you or rob you politely. The uniform is a costume, and the show's been running for years. Some officers are subtle. They'll fine you for loitering and then offer to waive the paperwork for a small donation. Others are more direct. They collect in daylight, counting coins like priests, taking confession. Nobody calls it corruption. They call it keeping the peace. And in a twisted way, it works. A predictable bribe is still more reliable than an unpredictable law. You follow one through the street, watching as he stops at each corner like a milkman making deliveries in reverse. A tavern owner hands him a cigar and a grin. A gambling den slips him an envelope. A brothel madam waves from a window and throws down a coin pouch that lands neatly in his hand. He tips his hat, pockets the take, and moves on. It's a system ugly, transparent, and incredibly efficient. Every now and then, someone tries to challenge it. A reformer shows up, full of noble outrage, waving pamphlets and promising to clean the department from top to bottom. The city nods politely, holds an investigation, fires one unlucky scapegoat, and calls it progress. Within a week, the same officers are back on the same corners, pockets slightly heavier from the celebration. Justice doesn't retire, it just takes an extended lunch break. The gangs understand this better than anyone. They don't fight the law, they rent it. A Bowery boy can brawl all night and still sleep soundly, knowing the sergeant will look the other way for a bottle or two. The dead rabbits pay their dues in cash and favors. Sometimes, when the bribes overlap, the cops end up refereeing the fights they were supposed to stop. You can almost admire the efficiency it's corruption with choreography. There's a particular lieutenant known for his fairness. He only shakes down half the street, claiming he doesn't want to overburden the poor. People like him, in the way you might like a rattlesnake that gives a polite rattle before it bites. He says things like, "We're all just trying to get by," and somehow makes it sound like scripture. The city prints his picture in the paper once, calling him a man of integrity. You can't tell if it's satire. You think about how the poor here have two governments, one in City Hall, all marble and speeches, and one in the street, all muscle and cash. The second one works better. You pay the right man, and your windows stay unbroken. You pay the wrong one, and they break just enough to remind you who's in charge. It's not justice, but it's consistency, and consistency is rare enough to feel like mercy. At night, you see the same officer again, now off duty but not off business. He drinks with a few locals at the tavern, telling stories about chasing thieves that everyone knows are fictional. They buy him rounds anyway. He leaves the bar swaying slightly, his pockets heavier than before. The moon catches the badge on his chest, and for a second it almost shines like something holy. Then he turns a corner, and it disappears into shadow. In the bend, the law isn't blind. It just looks the other way for a fee. The people don't curse it anymore, they budget for it. Justice has its own shift schedule here, and tonight it's clocked out early. They come in looking out of place, clean collars, shoes that still shine, and expressions hovering between fascination and disgust. The journalists have arrived. They carry notebooks like shields, pens like scalpels, and they're already composing sentences in their heads before they've even smelled the air. You can tell they've never been this far downtown. They keep glancing around as if the mud might stain their reputations. One of them sneezes, writes something down, and you know the word filth is going to appear at least 3 times in whatever he publishes. You watch a young reporter barely old enough to need a shave stand in the middle of Paradise Square with his pen poised like he's sketching a battlefield. His hat is too new, his coat too fine, and his confidence too loud. He's here to chronicle misery, but you can see the glint in his eye, part pity, part hunger. There's fame in describing hell if you make it sound poetic. He interviews a woman carrying water up 5 flights of stairs, then writes about her as if she's an exhibit. He calls her a symbol of perseverance. But she's just late for work. The papers send them here in waves. Each one thinks he's discovered something new, that 5 Points was hiding until he turned up with his inkpot and moral outrage. They scribble details like souvenirs mud up to the ankles, children with eyes too old for their faces, smells that no civilized city should tolerate. Then they'll go back uptown and read their notes to editors who'll nod gravely before publishing the whole thing under a headline like, "The Pit Beneath Our Progress." Readers will gasp between bites of breakfast, certain they're glimpsing another planet. The reporters always ask the same questions. Why do you stay? Don't you want better? What does it feel like to live here? The people answer with shrugs, jokes, or silence. How do you explain that leaving costs more than surviving? That the city's dirt has a way of sticking to you no matter where you go? They don't write that down. Doesn't fit the narrative. You follow one of them down an alley where sunlight barely reaches. He writes about the perpetual twilight of the bend, which sounds dramatic until you realize he's describing a blocked window. He stops by a tenement doorway where a group of children stare back at him. They don't smile. He calls them urchins in his notes, like they belong to a fairy tale. When one flips him a rude gesture, he calls it the defiance of the street-born. You almost laugh. Everything here becomes a metaphor once it hits paper. By evening, they're everywhere poking into cellars, scribbling by lamplight, asking questions they already know the answers to. Some buy drinks for the locals, hoping liquor will loosen stories. Others buy safety, paying a gang member to walk them back to their carriage. The Bowery boys love them. The dead rabbits tolerate them. Both understand that a little attention means leverage. After all, when the city's afraid of you, it negotiates better. When the articles finally appear, they hit the city like scandal. The worst slum on earth, one headline declares, as if the reporters had personally discovered sin. The descriptions are lurid. Feverish alleys, howling infants, women of ruin. It's half sermon, half horror story, and entirely true in all the wrong ways. Polite society clutches its pearls, murmuring about reform from the safety of parlors that smell of lavender and hypocrisy. The mayor promises action, the landlords promise nothing, but the people of 5 Points keep the papers, reading them aloud in taverns with a mix of pride and mockery. "Look at that," someone says. "We made the front page again." They laugh because it's better than anger, because if the rest of New York wants monsters, they might as well give them a show. You watch them toast to the article, mugs clinking against cracked wood, and realize that being feared is the closest thing to being seen. The young reporter leaves the next morning, notebook full and conscience clear. He'll publish his story, win praise, maybe even an award. He'll never come back. But the Bend will still be here alive, defiant, and entirely uninterested in how it looks in print. The ink dries, the headlines fade, and the mud remains exactly where it's always been. They arrive in carriages that look allergic to mud, stepping down with the poise of people certain they're saving the world. The reformers, well-dressed, well-fed, and so clean they almost sparkle. They come armed with pamphlets, soup, and expressions of moral determination that suggest they've trained for this moment in a drawing room. You can spot them by the way they wrinkle their noses politely, of course, as if trying not to offend the stench while still acknowledging it exists. They call their headquarters the 5 Points Mission. The name sounds holy enough, like a lighthouse built for lost souls. Inside, the floors shine, the air smells faintly of soap, and the volunteers wear aprons like armor. They serve soup that tastes like watered-down salvation and hand out Bible tracts that promise better days, though not necessarily in this lifetime. Children line up first, bowls clutched in small, grimy hands, followed by mothers who've mastered the art of gratitude on demand. Everyone smiles for the reformers, because the soup is hot, the sermon's short, and judgment-free at least until you leave. You watch one reformer ladle broth with exaggerated tenderness, as though proximity to poverty might bruise her spirit. She tells a hungry boy that God helps those who help themselves. He nods, because arguing doesn't fill the stomach faster. She beams, convinced she's made a difference. In a way, she has. He got soup. She got purpose. The exchange is uneven, but efficient. The mission means well. It really does. There's schooling in the basement, temperance meetings in the hall, and hymn singing that echoes down the block every Sunday night. Some residents attend just for the music, others because the benches are warmer than their rooms. The reformers preach virtue, cleanliness, and sobriety, as though the city's filth could be scrubbed off with enough moral soap. They never quite grasp that sin isn't what people here are drowning in. It's the mud, the hunger, the rent. Outside, a few men stand watching through the windows, half amused, half resentful. They call the place Heaven's Soup Kitchen and joke that the broth comes with a side of guilt. Still, they show up when it's cold. Hunger doesn't care about pride. One of them mutters that the reformers mean well but talk too much about saving souls and not enough about fixing roofs. He's not wrong. The mission can dry tears, but not basements. The children, though they're different. They learn their letters here, trace chalk on slates, sing hymns they don't quite understand. For them, it's a break from the chaos outside, a room where no one's drunk, no one's shouting, and someone says their name like it matters. When they leave, they go back to the same tenements, but for a few hours, they were clean, full, and almost hopeful. The mission counts that as victory. Maybe it is. Reformers record everything. They write reports filled with phrases like, the improvement of the lower orders and moral reclamation of the destitute. Their handwriting is immaculate, their conclusions preordained. They describe the Bend like it's an exotic jungle, a place of study rather than suffering. Later, those reports will circulate uptown, read aloud in parlors where people shake their heads in pity and donate just enough money to ease their consciences without changing anything. You can't entirely mock them, though. For all their awkwardness, They keep coming back. When cholera sweeps through the bend, they don't run. They scrub floors, nurse the sick, and bury the dead when no one else will. The city looks away, the police vanish, but the mission doors stay open. Maybe they're naive. Maybe they're saints. In 5 Points, the line between the two is thin and often muddy. As night falls, you see a woman leave the mission carrying a loaf of bread and a pamphlet tucked under her arm. She walks quickly, eyes down, clutching both, like lifelines. The reformers watch her go, satisfied, certain they've struck a blow against darkness. Maybe they have, in their way. Every small kindness here feels like rebellion. You step back into the street, where the laughter, arguments, and drunken singing drown out the hymns behind you. The mission's light spills weakly through its windows, barely cutting the fog. It's not enough to save the bend, not even close, but it flickers anyway, and sometimes that's all a place like this can hope for. He arrives wrapped in celebrity and curiosity, his coat too fine for the air it's moving through. Charles Dickens, the great observer of misery, has decided to take a stroll through yours. He's trailed by local officials, desperate to look useful, by newspapermen, eager for a quote, and by the kind of polite horror that travels well. You fall in behind them as they step into the bend, a parade of fine leather boots and bad intentions. The street responds the way it always does, staring back without apology. Dickens walks like he's afraid the ground might stain him. His pen is ready, his eyes scanning every corner for material. He's been told this is the heart of New York's shame, and he's determined to confirm it. The smell hits him first. You see his face tighten, a mix of fascination and offense, as if he's discovered a moral failing in the air itself. "Good God," he mutters. It is the most appalling scene of filth and wretchedness. You resist the urge to point out that the filth is free. The rent isn't. They take him past the tenements, those tall, sweating coffins stacked with families and bad plumbing. The guide gestures dramatically, explaining how 20 people can share a single room. Dickens frowns, scribbles something in his notebook, and glances upward as if divine intervention might peek through the cracked roof. You imagine what he's writing. Something about despair, decay, and the moral duty of civilization. You doubt he'll mention the landlord, though. Landlords rarely make good literature. Children dart around his entourage, barefoot, laughing in that sharp, mischievous way that sounds like survival pretending to be play. One tugs at Dickens's coat and asks for a coin. The writer hesitates, pats his pockets, then looks helplessly at his guide. The boy laughs and runs off, leaving the great man staring after him as though he's just witnessed a ghost. In a way, he has. The living here haunt themselves. At a corner, a woman hangs laundry over a line strung between windows that haven't closed properly in years. Dickens stops again, struck by the sight of shirts flapping like surrender flags. "Do they live this way always?" he asks. The guide nods gravely, as though revealing a state secret. Dickens sighs, the sound of pity with punctuation. "It is beyond anything in Street Giles," he says, invoking London's own dark heart. The officials beam. It's a kind of twisted civic pride. New York, out-squalling the competition. Inside one of the boarding houses, the air is a wall of heat and human noise. A baby cries, a man coughs, and the floor sticks to your boots. Dickens presses a handkerchief to his face and peers into a doorway where 5 people sleep in a space meant for 2. His pen scratches furiously. You wonder if he'll write about the smell, the sound, the way the walls seem to pulse with breath, or if he'll just turn it all into metaphor, the eternal suffering of the poor, neatly packaged for readers who'll sip tea and nod at the tragedy from afar. When he leaves the building, he looks smaller somehow, as if the weight of the place has bent him a little. Outside, the sunlight feels almost cruel. He takes one long breath of it, visibly relieved, and says, "The mind cannot imagine such degradation." You glance around. The mind can, actually. It just doesn't like to linger there. By the time Dickens departs, The crowd has thinned. The street exhales, returning to its usual rhythm of noise and necessity. You picture him later that night, in a fine hotel uptown, writing by lamplight. His pen will dance across the page, immortalizing the bend as a moral spectacle, a warning, a parable. He'll get it half right. He'll capture the horror, but not the humor. The stink, but not the stubborn grace. The rot, but not the rhythm that keeps this place alive. Tomorrow, his words will travel the world, confirming what polite society wants to believe, that 5 points is everything wrong with civilization. And maybe it is, but as you watch the street fill again with music, arguments, and the smell of supper cooking somewhere, you think Dickens missed the part that matters most. This isn't just a pit, it's proof. Proof that people can live in the ruins and still laugh, still fight, still dance. And that, no matter what he writes, can't fit neatly between the lines of any notebook. You meet them in doorways, in taverns, and in the kind of alleys that never see sunlight. They move with the confidence of businessmen who've just invented a new market because they have. Crime here isn't rebellion, it's administration. Theft is a trade, burglary a startup, and the men running it are entrepreneurs of the desperate. You watch one of them, a pickpocket named Shiner, standing on a corner, scanning the crowd like an accountant eyeing inventory. His fingers twitch, not from nerves but from habit, like they're practicing even when they're empty. He spots a mark, a merchant too clean, too sure of his pockets, and slides in behind him. You almost don't see it happen. A gentle bump, a soft apology, a coin purse gone. Shiner doesn't run. He strolls away, tucking the prize into his coat with the calm efficiency of a man closing a ledger. No kids, no clergy, he mutters, more to himself than to anyone. The code. It's old, passed down like scripture. Kids are off limits because they're mirrors. And no thief wants to stare at himself too soon. Clergy, because some things are better left unjinxed. Everyone else? Fair game. The bend runs on that unspoken order. There's a hierarchy, beggars at the base, pickpockets in the middle, burglars at the top, and fences pulling strings like shadow bankers. Every item has a journey, from pocket to hand to pawn shop to someone else's pocket again. You could trace half the city's possessions through this loop if you had the patience. But no one does. The system feeds itself, tidy and relentless. In a back room lit by one sputtering candle, you see the Thieves' Guild in miniature. A dozen men huddled around a table, sharing bread, gossip, and strategy. They talk about locks the way poets talk about love. Each one with its own weaknesses, its own personality. One man, a burglar named Finch, swears he can open any door in New York with nothing more than a hairpin and good timing. Another argues that timing is overrated if you can bribe the night watch instead. Both have a point. There's humor in it too, the kind that comes from long practice. One thief tells a story about stealing the same watch twice from the same man on the same day. The table howls with laughter, and for a moment, it feels almost noble, this art of survival through mischief. But when the laughter fades, there's something harder underneath. They steal because it's the only economy that welcomes them. The factories pay pennies, the docks pay pain, but a lucky hand can make a week's wage in a heartbeat. It's dangerous math, but it adds up faster than honesty. You step outside and see the younger ones, the apprentices learning the trade. They practice with string and buttons, timing each motion until it's as natural as breathing. A kid named Little Tom can lift a wallet before you finish blinking. He grins when he's caught, a gap-toothed flash of pride, and swears he's going to be the best in the city someday. No one doubts him. In a place where the law feels optional, ambition takes strange shapes. The police know, of course. They always know. But arresting a pickpocket means paperwork, and paperwork pays nothing. Better to take a cut and call it deterrence. Justice here runs on commission. When someone does get caught, The punishment depends on who they've annoyed more, the victim or the cop. Fines are common, so are disappearances. Late at night, you follow a group through the alleys, silent as ghosts. They move like a team of craftsmen, each with a role. One distracts, one unlocks, one carries. The job is clean, quick, almost elegant. When they finish, the spoils are divided with the precision of accountants. No greed, no arguments. Everyone gets their share. Everyone eats. It's not chaos, it's commerce with better jokes. Back at the tavern, the gang drinks to their success. Shiner raises his glass and toasts to honest work done dishonestly. The room laughs, clinks, drinks. Outside, the city hums its endless hymn of noise and need. Somewhere, a merchant pats his pocket and realizes too late that honesty doesn't pay half as well. In the Bend, crime isn't a symptom, it's a profession. You can't blame them for taking it up. In a city built on hustle, they just skip the part where you needed permission. It's just another morning, though the light feels wrong. The fog hangs low, thick with the smell of iron and something heavier. You turn down the alley everyone pretends doesn't exist, and there it is, a shape in the gutter, half hidden by shadow and the city's indifference. A man, or what's left of one. His hat lies a few feet away, filled with water from last night's rain. You stand there a moment, not because you're shocked, but because it's the kind of sight that asks for silence, even here. Then someone steps around you, barely glancing down, and life resumes its crawl. No one screams, no one calls for the police. There's no point. By the time any one official shows up, the killer will be long gone, the witnesses too sober to remember or too drunk to care. Death here doesn't cause panic. It just shifts the rhythm. A vendor moves his cart a few feet to avoid the puddle. A kid pokes the body with a stick until an older woman yanks him away, muttering something about bad luck. The alley absorbs it all like it's been built for this. Maybe it has. They call it Murder Alley, though no one remembers who coined the name or why it stuck. It could be this morning's body, or the one before that, or the one before that. The name fits too easily, like a shoe worn smooth from use. It's not a place, it's a habit. The city built it narrow so sound can't escape, so secrets echo until they fade into rumor. If you listen long enough, you can almost hear the ghosts arguing with each other about who deserved it more. A few men lean against the wall, smoking, trading theories. One says, "It's gang business." Another swears it's over a woman. They all agree it doesn't matter. The dead man will be buried in the potter's field. Another nameless entry in the city's endless ledger of failure. You watch one of them spit into the mud and mutter, "Could have been me." He doesn't sound afraid, just tired. When the police finally arrive, they do it with theatrical reluctance. Two officers, hats tilted, expressions somewhere between boredom and disdain. One kneels to poke at the body with his baton. The other takes notes like he's writing a shopping list. "Unknown male," he says. "Estimated 30. Cause? Being in 5 points." They both laugh. It's not cruelty, it's economy. Laughter's cheaper than sympathy. You notice a photographer at the edge of the crowd, one of those new types who capture tragedy for profit. He adjusts his tripod, tilts his head, and waits for the light to hit just right. The flash startles the pigeons, but no, one else flinches. By next week, the image will be printed in a paper somewhere uptown, under a headline that makes the death sound exotic. The readers will shudder, feel righteous, and turn the page. As the body's lifted onto a cart, the street returns to normal. A woman hangs laundry again, kids start a game of marbles, and a drunk hums an off-key tune that might have once been Irish. The stain in the gutter will dry by noon, washed thin by another round of rain or spilled gin. Tomorrow, someone will walk through this same alley on their way to work, never noticing the patch where blood met dirt. You stand there a moment longer, feeling the city's pulse under your feet steady, unbothered. Life here isn't fragile, It's stubborn. Death is just a neighbor, not a surprise. You think of the man's face, pale in the half-light, and how nobody even asked his name. Then you walk away too, because standing still in Murder Alley is its own kind of invitation. Behind you, the fog swallows the street again, softening the edges, smoothing the memory. The city forgets fast, but the ground never does. You follow the noise first. A pulse of laughter and shouting leaks from the street like steam from a cracked pipe, and you let it pull you in. The Bowery theaters have risen, gaudy and glorious, a palace district for the people who can't afford palaces. Their walls are cheap plaster, their chandeliers dusty, but no one cares. Inside, it's all spectacle and noise. The poor don't come for refinement. They come to forget. You hand over a few coins, sticky from someone else's pocket, and squeeze into a seat that feels borrowed from a barn. The air is thick with sweat, tobacco, and anticipation. Someone's selling roasted chestnuts in the aisle, another's yelling about stolen wallets, and already two men are arguing about who's sitting on whose coat. It's chaos, but a familiar kind, the kind that feels like home. The curtain rises to a roar. On stage, an actor in a powdered wig declares undying love to a woman whose makeup is melting under the lamps. The crowd cheers, boos, throws orange peels. They're not passive. They're participants. A bad line gets hissed. A good joke gets applause. And when the villain struts out, half the audience yells advice at him. It's democracy in pure form, loud, unruly, unbothered by decorum. You realize quickly that this isn't theater. It's combat with scenery. Between acts, a drunk in the back starts singing "The Wearing of the Green." The crowd joins in, the melody swelling until the walls seem to shake. For a few minutes, you're part of something that feels bigger than entertainment. It's release. A collective exhale from a city holding its breath too long. The songs aren't just tunes, they're rebellion disguised as rhythm. The Bowery stage is a mirror, but a crooked one. You see heroes who look like dock workers, villains who sound suspiciously like politicians, and love stories that end with someone getting punched. Melodrama is the currency here, and the audience spends freely. The actors play to the back row, voices booming, gestures wide enough to be seen from the rafters. There's no subtlety, no quiet heartbreak, just tragedy painted in broad strokes and comedy that hits like a brick through glass. A fight breaks out near the orchestra pit when someone throws a bottle at the wrong moment. The musicians don't stop playing. They've seen worse. The ushers don't bother either. The rule is simple. Settle it quickly, then sit back down. Within minutes, the brawlers are sharing a flask and laughing like old friends. You think, not for the first time, that the Bowery might be the only place where violence counts as intermission. Behind the stage, actors prepare for their next cue, trading gossip and whiskey in equal measure. They're not stars, they're survivors, hustling applause one night at a time. The leading lady curses as she adjusts her corset, muttering about the draft that seeps through the floorboards. The villain, a man with a face built for sneers, practices dying in the mirror, perfecting his final gasp. They know the audience doesn't come for perfection. They come for noise, for feeling, for anything that doesn't smell like failure. Outside, the theaters multiply, spilling light into the filthy streets. More stages, more songs, more dreams that dissolve with sunrise. The Bowery becomes its own kind of carnival, a riot of sound and sin, where everyone's equal for a few hours, so long as they can pay the ticket price. Reformers clutch their pearls, declaring it immoral. The working class just calls it Tuesday. When the final curtain drops, the applause is thunderous, defiant. People stomp, whistle, cheer for an encore that never comes. You step out into the night, ears still ringing, heart strangely light. The city looks different after the Bowery, uglier, maybe, but also more alive. Around you, the crowd scatters, arguing about favorite scenes, quoting lines, laughing in the rain. The gutters shine under gaslight. Somewhere down the block, another show begins, and you think, yes, this is what survival sounds like. Not quiet endurance, but noise. The Bowery's gift to the world. Tragedy you can dance to. It comes slow at first, like a rumor. A cough here, a fever there, someone muttering about bad water. Then it spreads quiet, steady, certain, as if the city itself is exhaling sickness. Cholera doesn't announce itself with drama. It just arrives, uninvited and punctual. You watch it move through the bend like a tax collector with perfect records, taking from every door without bias. Rich men in uptown offices talk about containment. Down here, it's already done. The smell of lime and panic fills the streets. Doctors walk fast, arguing about miasma and morality, waving handkerchiefs over their mouths like that'll stop anything. They insist the air is poisoned, that if everyone just held their breath long enough, the epidemic might get bored and leave. Meanwhile, the rats New York's most dedicated civil servants handle the population control for free. You'd almost thank them if they weren't also chewing through your floorboards. You pass a pump surrounded by buckets and bodies. Someone swears it's the water. Someone else swears it's sin. The truth doesn't matter. Belief works faster than science here. Families haul their sick into the street to catch what little breeze there is, hoping air might save what the city won't. A priest walks by offering last rites like it's door-to-door service, and a boy follows behind, collecting coins from the ones who can still move their hands. Everyone hustles, even death. Inside the tenements, the air feels thick enough to chew. Rooms packed with bodies, some alive, some not enough to tell the difference. Mothers fan their children until their arms give. Out. Then just sit, staring, waiting for something to change that never does. You hear coughing behind every wall, footsteps slowing, and then silence. The landlords still collect rent. Disease doesn't qualify as an excuse. Doctors arrive late, if they arrive at all. They carry stethoscopes like props, talk about sanitation initiatives, and leave notes no one reads. One of them stops you, eager to demonstrate his theory. He believes bad air causes bad morals, or maybe it's the other way around. You're not sure which, and neither is he. He sprinkles disinfectant around like perfume, then scurries off to write a report about how the poor are uncooperative patients. Every day the wagons come, loaded with the unclaimed. The drivers hum to themselves, their horses indifferent. Children wave as they pass, because they've seen it too often to be afraid. The newspapers call it a tragedy, but only after they've finished describing it like theater. The mayor makes speeches about divine punishment. The reformers make soup, and the rest of the city holds its breath, pretending the wind doesn't blow both ways. In the midst of it all, the saloons stay open. Of course they do. Whiskey kills germs, they say, though it kills plenty else first. You watch men toast to survival with the same hands that bury the dead. Laughter rises over the coughing, sharp and reckless, the only medicine anyone can afford. The piano still plays. Even misery needs a soundtrack. At night, the city glows faintly with the light of too many candles. Every window becomes a vigil, every flicker a roll call of who's left. You walk past them all, feeling the weight of air thick with both decay and defiance. The bend refuses to die quietly. It wheezes, stumbles, spits blood on the cobblestones, and keeps breathing anyway. By the time the epidemic burns itself out, it leaves behind more ghosts than names. The survivors don't speak of it much. There's no room for mourning when rent's due, and hunger's punctual. The doctors pat themselves on the back, the reformers declare victory, and the rats remain gainfully employed. You look around and realize the bend doesn't change, it just sheds its weakest layers and grows new ones. Tomorrow the streets will fill again. The vendors will shout. The children will chase one another through the puddles, and the air will smell faintly of lie and survival. Life here doesn't triumph. It endures, one cough at a time. Fresh outrage always sells. The papers print new horrors from the Bend disease, crime, children sleeping in alleys, and the city clutches its pearls all over again. Reformers descend like clockwork, armed with soup, pamphlets, and divine purpose. Charity is the new fashion. Uptown ladies gather coins in silver bowls, whispering about salvation between tea refills. Down here, that translates to new missions sprouting where saloons once stood. The neighborhood doesn't sober up, it just swaps its liquor for lectures. You pass one of the new missions, freshly painted, bright enough to offend the surrounding brick. Inside, volunteers bustle with holy energy, distributing bread and moral guidance in equal measure. A preacher stands at the door, booming about redemption while keeping one eye on the donation jar. Behind him, a woman ladles stew into bowls, as if speed might sanctify it. You take one look at the lined shoeless men, mothers clutching babies, boys pretending not to be starving, and realize this is what hope looks like when it's rationed. The sermons are the same everywhere. Sin breeds suffering. Laziness breeds sin. And cleanliness is next to godliness, though the soap runs out by noon. Reformers talk about salvation as if it's something you can bottle, something they can hand out with a ladle. They mean well, which somehow makes it worse. You watch one young woman kneel to speak to a barefoot child. She smiles too hard, promises he'll grow up to be respectable, if he prays. The boy grins, pockets 2 rolls, and disappears before she can finish the verse. The crowd laughs softly. They've seen this dance before. Every block has its own brand of redemption. One mission forbids whiskey, another forbids dancing. One ambitious group forbids fun entirely. They scrub the walls, repaint signs, sing hymns loud enough to drown out the taverns. For a few weeks, it almost feels like they're winning. Then payday comes, and the crowd drifts back to the places with music. Faith fills the soul, but gin fills the stomach faster. The reformers don't give up. They double down. They organize temperance parades, rows of men and women marching with banners, declaring war on vice. Children are drafted to carry signs reading, "Water for Life." The drunks cheer them on, lifting bottles in salute. It's hard to take a crusade seriously when it blocks your way to the bar. Still, the marches grow larger, and the papers call it progress. Behind the sermons, though, there's another kind of calculation. The city is watching. Landowners want their property values back, and politicians want their reputations clean. Charity becomes civic strategy. Save the Bend, they cry, meaning make it profitable. New rules appear: curfews, inspections, ordinances with words like improvement and moral hygiene. Reform disguised as eviction. The poor aren't uplifted, they're relocated. You talk to a man sweeping the street outside a mission, a job the reformers created to restore dignity through work. He grins without looking up. "Dignity's fine," he says, "but they could have paid me in dinner." Inside, you hear the choir starting up again, voices rising in a hymn about purity. The melody drifts out the door, chased by laughter from the bar across the street. The tavern pianist answers with a ragtime tune, and for a few glorious seconds, holiness and hedonism share a rhythm. Night falls, and the lamps outside, the mission glow like tired halos. A few stragglers linger, clutching pamphlets about temperance, not sure where else to go. The preacher locks the doors, satisfied that he's made a dent in sin, and the alley fills again with the sound of life arguing, flirting, cursing, surviving. The city's great experiment in moral engineering continues, one bowl of soup at a time. You walk away and glance back once. The mission's light flickers weakly in the fog, noble but small. It's something, though. For every sermon drowned out by hunger, for every prayer forgotten at the tavern door, there's still a stubborn spark that refuses to die. Maybe that's what salvation really looks like here, not victory, just endurance. And for 5 points, that's enough. They come at dawn, because justice looks better in morning light. You wake to the sound of boots in puddles, shouts bouncing off the brick, the metallic clatter of law pretending to be order. The police raid has begun. Again. They always say it's for crime, or morality, or the children. But you've lived here long enough to know better. These raids aren't about cleaning up the bend. They're about putting on a show for the people who can afford to watch it from a distance. Officers fan out through the alleys, swinging clubs more for rhythm than necessity. Behind them trail the reporters, pencils ready, cameras poised, flashbulbs pop like fireworks. Each burst freezing the chaos into a neat story. Heroic police sweep through Slum. The captions practically write themselves. One officer kicks open a door, shouts for everyone inside to stand still, then waits while the photographer gets his angle. The poor line up quietly, dazed but cooperative. They've learned this dance by heart. You see a woman clutching her baby as the sergeant questions her about illegal activity. She nods, says she's just washing clothes. He nods back, checks a box in his notebook, and moves on. Behind him, another man pretends to inspect the room, while a journalist describes squalid conditions unfit for human habitation. You want to tell him the camera makes it look worse than it smells, but it's not worth it. Poverty is more profitable when it's tragic. By noon, they've arrested a few drunks, broken up a card game, and confiscated enough gin to fill a sermon. The newspapers will call it a victory. The mayor will call it progress. But the drunks will be back by sundown, the cards replaced, and the gin refilled from the same hidden barrels. The bend doesn't bend toward reform, it leans, sways, and stands right back up again. You follow a group of officers as they haul their criminals into the street. One man complains about his cuffs being too tight. The officer tells him he should have thought of that before he resisted. You didn't see any resistance. You did see the photographer crouch for a better shot as the flash seared another heroic moment into history. Got it, he says, grinning. That'll sell. Up the block, a small crowd gathers to watch. Some jeer, some cheer, some just stand still, eyes flat. The police like the attention. They shout orders louder than necessary, their voices carrying for the benefit of the onlookers and the reporters scribbling in their pads. It's less about law and more about optics. The city needs proof it's doing something about 5 points, and this, apparently, is what something looks like. Inside a tavern, you find the owner sweeping up broken glass. He shrugs when you ask about the raid. They'll drink somewhere else tonight, he says. Maybe here again tomorrow. He's already straightening the chairs. No point crying over publicity. He knows the raids are part of the ecosystem now, as dependable as sunrise and as temporary as outrage. Later, you overhear a politician giving a statement to the press. This demonstrates our commitment to law and order, he declares, chin high, voice firm. He doesn't mention the part where his campaign funds came from the same saloon keepers he's condemning. The journalists jot it down anyway. A few nod approvingly, as though words alone could disinfect the street. When the last wagon rattles away, carrying the arrested and the evidence meaning the gin, the photographers pack up, satisfied. The police light cigars. The flash of justice has ended. What remains is the same muddy street, the same hungry eyes, the same walls that hold everything the headlines leave out. You watch as the bend exhales, doors reopen. The same children who watched the arrests now play in the street, kicking tin cans through puddles. The tavern fills again. A woman starts singing from a window, her voice cutting through the leftover smoke. The city will wake tomorrow to bold headlines and polished speeches. But here, nothing's changed except the angle of the sunlight. You realize the raids were never meant to fix anything. They were meant to be seen fixing it. And in that way, maybe they worked. The photographers got their pictures, the politicians got their applause, and the poor got what they always get left behind in the same place, waiting for the next performance. It begins somewhere small, just a single note slipping out of an open window, carried through the stink and smoke like it's lost its way. Then another joins it. A fiddle, a drum, Someone stomps a boot in time, and suddenly the alley comes alive. The music doesn't ask permission. It just happens, spilling over broken cobblestones, weaving through the steam and shouting, building into something that makes the whole place feel less like ruin and more like heartbeat. You follow the sound to a courtyard wedged between two leaning buildings. It's half dirt, half trash, but the people there treat it like a ballroom. The fiddler's missing two teeth, the drummer uses an overturned crate, and the dancers, barefoot, laughing, move as if they own the night. The rhythm's crooked, syncopated, alive in a way no polished orchestra could ever manage. You can feel it in your ribs before you realize you're tapping your foot. No one plans these gatherings. They just spark out of the evening like fire from flint. A whiskey bottle passes from hand to hand. A child claps along on a tin lid, and the line between exhaustion and joy blurs until they're the same thing. A woman with a shawl tied tight around her shoulders sings a verse in a voice so rough it sounds carved from the street itself. The words don't matter. It's the rhythm, the push and pull of something ancient and defiant that makes you understand her. This is the strange magic of the Bend. Out of the dirt comes art. Out of misery, melody. The Irish bring their jigs, quick and bright. The freedmen bring their drums, deep and patient. And somewhere between the two, something new is born. Feet slap the ground in conversation. Fiddles wail, hands clap, and the crowd becomes one loud, breathing thing. You realize you're watching the beginning of something that doesn't have a name yet. Not dance, not rebellion, but something that feels like both. A boy takes center, all elbows and confidence, and starts to stomp out a rhythm. The others cheer him on. He's not dancing the way anyone taught him, he's inventing it. Step by step. Wood meeting earth, skin meeting rhythm, body answering sound. You watch him blend the Irish quickstep with the heel beats of the black dancers, improvising with the arrogance of youth and the precision of hunger. It's raw and perfect in its chaos. The drunk in the corner calls for another tune, tossing a coin that lands in the fiddler's cup with a splash. Laughter erupts, the tempo picks up, and suddenly even the walls seem to move. You look around and realize that everyone here, every soul who's been scraping through another hopeless day, is smiling. Not pretending, smiling. In a place where breath costs effort, joy feels like theft. Tonight, they're stealing it back. Outside the courtyard, the city keeps grinding factory whistles, carriage wheels, the endless sermon of survival. But in here, the noise has changed shape. It's rhythm now. It's the clatter of progress, before progress even knows its name. You can almost hear the future in it, something that will one day travel far beyond these alleys, cleaned up and polished, but never quite losing the dirt it came from. When the music finally stops, it doesn't really end, it just fades. The dancers laugh, panting, collapsing against one another like old friends, though half of them met only tonight. The fiddler wipes sweat from his brow, nods once, and tucks his bow away. No one claps. They just breathe together, the sound of hearts catching up. Then someone starts humming again, soft but certain, and the spell starts to build all over. You step back into the street, the night buzzing, behind you. The Bend looks the same, filthy, crooked, alive, but now it feels different. You've seen the pulse under the grime, the beauty no reformer could ever diagram. The rhythm lingers in your bones, tapping faintly like memory, reminding you that even here, in the worst slum on earth, the city's future doesn't crawl out of the filth. It dances. It starts with the smell sharp, metallic, wrong. Then the sound follows. The scream of wood splitting, the crackle that's too steady to be a street fire. Someone shouts, "Smoke," and suddenly the night explodes into motion. Flames crawl up the side of a tenement like they've been waiting for the invitation. The sky glows orange, the street glows panic, and within minutes, the Bend is awake, coughing, shouting, running in circles that go nowhere. You push through the crowd, tasting ash before you see the worst of it. The fire licks through windows, hungry and practiced, devouring walls that were barely standing. Anyway, it moves fast, leaping from building to building, turning homes into torches. Buckets appear, forming a sloppy line from the pump down the street. Men shout orders, no one follows. A woman wails for a child still inside, and a stranger grabs her shoulders, swearing he'll find the boy. You don't see him again. The fire brigades arrive, stumbling in with more confidence than water. Their uniforms gleam, their engines shine, but their hoses sputter. The crowd cheers anyway, desperate for heroes even if they're decorative. The firemen argue over jurisdiction, while the flames make their own decisions. Buckets keep passing, hands blistering, feet slipping in the black mud where water and soot mix. The smell of burning fabric and hair settles over everything, clinging to the throat. You can't swallow it down. The tenements collapse in slow surrender, each one bowing before the next. Families pour into the street with what they can carry, mostly nothing. One man clutches a cracked mirror. Another drags a chair that used to belong to a kitchen. Children cry because everyone else does. The fire dances over rooftops, a cruel performer soaking up its applause. Every scream, every crash, another verse in its song. Across the street, the landlords gather, coats drawn tight, faces lit by the inferno. They call it tragedy, quietly, carefully. Then one of them mutters something about insurance, and you catch the flicker of satisfaction he tries to hide. Fire, after all, doesn't just cleanse, it pays. The newspapers will call it an unfortunate accident. The landlords will call it an opportunity to rebuild. The people who lived here will call it what it is, loss. Again, you spot the preacher from the mission, coat singed, helping an old woman to her feet. He whispers a prayer no one can hear over the roar. Behind him, the tavern burns bright, bottles popping like gunfire. Someone laughs, the sound brittle, close to madness. Hell's got nothing on. This, he says, and you can't tell if he's bragging or warning. The flames finally start to die as dawn creeps in, leaving behind the bones of the street, charred beams, puddles of ash, smoke curling like ghosts from the ruins. The fire brigade poses for a photograph, their faces proud and tired, while the people behind them pick through what's left of their lives. A girl finds a half-burned doll, presses it to her chest, and says nothing. A man stares at an empty patch of ground where his door used to be. No one bothers to ask when help will come. They already know the answer. By noon, the city officials arrive. They tour the wreckage with handkerchiefs over their noses, taking notes they'll never read. We must do better, one declares, careful to look away from the survivors. Reporters scribble, cameras flash, and the mayor's assistant whispers about how this tragedy proves reform is needed someday, when it's convenient. You want to laugh, or shout, or both. As the ashes cool, you watch the crowd begin to rebuild the only way they know how. With hands, curses, and borrowed nails. The smell lingers, thick and final. The Bend has burned before and will burn again, because in this part of the city, destruction isn't disaster, it's routine. You walk away through the haze, the ground soft with soot, and realize the cruelest thing about the fire isn't how much it took. It's how much it left exactly the same. It doesn't happen all at once. The city doesn't wake up one morning and decide to erase 5 points. It just starts pretending it never existed. The bulldozers arrive quietly, like polite executioners. They don't roar right away. They idle, snorting exhaust into the air, waiting for orders that will sound like progress. You stand at the corner of the Bend and watch them line up, a metal army staring down the ghosts. The rats scatter. For once, they're the ones being evicted. The first wall comes down with a sound that's more sigh than crash. Dust rises like memory, thick and gray, coating everything that's left standing. A few families linger nearby, watching as the street where they were born becomes rubble. A woman mutters that she's lived here her whole life, and no one writes that down. The foreman waves her back, tells her it's for her own good. It always is. Progress, they call it. Sanitation, improvement, renewal. So many polite words for destruction. The city finally had enough of embarrassment. Too many reporters, too many sermons, too many photos of children barefoot in alleys. It was easier to bury the problem than to solve it. So they dig. Every scoop of the shovel is both an apology and an accusation. You walk the edges of what used to be the heart of chaos. The old taverns are gone, the missions shuttered, the air oddly quiet. The noise that once defined the place, shouting, singing, laughter layered over desperation, has been replaced by machinery. It's a cleaner sound, but emptier. The smell, too, has changed. No more sweat, no more rot, no more cooking fires. Just dirt, oil, and the faint tang of ozone from the power lines. You realize the city's winning, and it feels less like victory than sterilization. Politicians pose beside the wreckage for photographs. At last, one declares, we have conquered the slum. His shoes never touch the ground. Behind him, a banner flaps in the wind. Urban Renewal Project. It's printed in cheerful blue letters, as if optimism could bleach history. The newspapers call it the rebirth of a neighborhood. No one mentions the funerals of the tenements. The people scatter to cheaper corners, carrying what they can, which is mostly nothing. They melt into other wards, other names. Some head uptown, some vanish west, some board ships for somewhere that doesn't know them yet. The Bend becomes a memory faster than a building can fall. Only the foundations remain, dark lines in the dirt, where walls once leaned against one another for balance. Still, you can't help but feel the city's nervous about what it's doing. It doesn't erase easily. There are whispers about curses, about how the ground still moves strange here, soft and unsettled from the old pond buried beneath. The laborers joke that the mud won't let go of the bricks. One slips, nearly swallowed ankle deep, and laughs too hard afterward. Even the earth seems reluctant to forget. A few blocks away, new plans are already pinned up. Clean streets, open parks, respectable buildings for respectable people. The sketches look peaceful, almost smug. You know what they mean. The poor don't belong in the picture anymore. History is being redrawn in straight lines. As the last of the old streetlights comes down, you notice something odd in the fading light, a tune. Faint, impossible. A boy tapping a rhythm on a tin can, echoing from an alley that technically doesn't exist anymore. The sound carries for just the moment before it's swallowed by the growl of engines. But you hear it, the heartbeat that refuses to die. By nightfall, the bulldozers rest. The city congratulates itself, sends out press releases, and calls the site by a new name. The map changes. The memory lingers. You stand in the dust, the ghosts of the points pressing close, and you understand the truth the reformers never could. You can flatten the buildings, drive out the poor, rename the streets, but you can't pave over what they made here. 5 Points doesn't end. It just moves. They call it renewal, though it looks suspiciously like erasure. You stand at the edge of what used to be the Bend, watching the reformers in their clean suits and hopeful expressions gesture at blueprints no one from here can read. The air smells different now, damp soil instead of sewage, fresh-cut grass instead of rot. For the first time in decades, the wind doesn't sting your lungs. It should feel like victory. It doesn't. They've decided to build a park, right here on the grave of misery, Mulberry Bend Park. They'll name it something green, something symbolic, something that says, "See, we fixed it." You watch them measure and argue over benches and fountains, debating where trees should go as if roots can't feel ghosts. The ground, soft with old memory, doesn't seem convinced. When the workers dig, the earth spits up reminders. A shoe buckle, a broken bottle, the charred brick of a tenement that once leaned too far toward collapse. They toss the pieces aside, sweep the past into piles, and call it progress. Children come first, timid but curious. They hover at the fences, staring through the slats at the miracle of open space. Grass is something they've only seen in uptown postcards, and here it grows right out of what used to be garbage. When the gates finally open, they rush in barefoot, laughing like they've stolen something sacred. They run until they fall. And when they hit the ground, no one yells at them for getting dirty. Parents follow slowly, uncertain. They sit on benches that creak less than the beds they left behind, eyes darting to the corners, waiting for trouble that doesn't come. By afternoon, the park fills with life. Vendors wander through selling lemonade and roasted nuts, the kind of treats that once seemed impossible here. Preachers drift in, claiming credit, and reformers stroll proudly along the paths they designed. A few journalists snap photographs, searching for that perfect image of redemption. Sunlight on smiling faces, poverty replaced by playgrounds. It's a good story, the kind that fits neatly in a headline. But as dusk falls, you start to notice the absences. The music is gone, the fiddles, the laughter, the drunken arguments that used to hum like the city's pulse. The smell of baking bread mixed with smoke is gone too. The noise that replaced it is softer, cleaner, but also hollow. The Bend didn't just hold misery. It held everything. And now it feels like someone scraped the soul out along with the grime. Still, there's something hauntingly beautiful about it. The trees catch the evening light, swaying above the same dirt that once swallowed too many dreams. Kids chase each other through the grass, their shouts echoing between the new buildings like a promise the city finally intends to keep. For a moment, you let yourself believe it might last. The reformers return the next morning, notebooks in hand, delighted by how well their experiment looks from a distance. They talk about civic pride, moral hygiene, the triumph of human decency. None of them mention how many families had to disappear for the view to improve. You overhear one man say, "This park will be a model for the future." You can't help thinking the future might not thank him. Night settles again. The park grows quiet. The new lampposts hum, and the shadows stretch long across the grass. You swear you hear it, then a faint rhythm under the silence. A boot tap, a laugh, a distant fiddle, tuning itself in the dark. Maybe it's imagination, maybe it's memory. Either way, it's proof that you can plant trees, build fountains, rename streets, but you can't drain history out of the ground. The Bend breathes under the soil, quieter now, but alive in a way the planners will never understand. The park is lovely, sure, but it's not an ending. It's an apology wrapped in greenery, a soft cover laid over hard truth. The city will move on, proud of its cleanliness, while somewhere in the breeze, the old songs still drift through the leaves, ghosts humming to remind anyone who listens what it costs to make this place beautiful. They go quietly, because there's no one left to listen. You watch them pack what little they have, furniture that looks tired of being furniture, clothes that still smell faintly of smoke, hope folded carefully between rags. The landlord sold the land, the city sold the future, and the poor sell whatever's left. They scatter north, into streets that don't yet know their names. It feels less like migration and more like exile disguised as moving day. You follow them past the edges of the new park, where the dirt still clings to their boots, as if it doesn't want to let go. The reformers promised better housing, better air, better everything. What they get instead are rooms just as cramped, just more expensive, hidden behind fresh paint and polite street names. Poverty doesn't die here, it relocates. It folds itself into basements and attics, waits for the next census to forget it. In the new neighborhoods, the faces are the same, just paler from lack of sun. Children run through alleys that look suspiciously familiar, their laughter bouncing off brick walls that already smell of mildew. There's less trash in the gutters, but not by much. The same old games return, the police pretending to enforce, the politicians pretending to care, the newspapers pretending to understand. You could draw a map connecting the dots of every renewed slum, each one replacing the last like chapters in a book no one stops rewriting. A man you recognize from the Bend opens a corner tavern. He jokes that he followed his customers north. The whiskey still tastes like regret and water. A woman who once scrubbed floors for the missions now takes in laundry from uptown wives who will never learn her name. The jobs haven't changed, only the view out the window has, and even that feels temporary. The city, proud of its clean park and vanished problem, starts to look away again. Officials stand before reporters and declare that progress has prevailed. They mean that the evidence has moved out of sight. The slum is no longer a spectacle, just a rumor whispered through tenement walls. The reformers return to their churches, the politicians to their podiums, and the people to the same long hours and thin dinners. The names change. The story doesn't. You walk those new streets one evening, the air thick with the smell of coal and rain. Somewhere, a fiddle plays. You pause, listening. It's not the same melody you heard in the Bend, but it carries the same defiance, rough, imperfect, alive. The people haven't forgotten how to make rhythm out of ruin. They never will. Even as the city keeps pushing them outward, they leave echoes behind, soft reminders that they existed where no one wanted them to. By the river, new construction rises, factories and boarding houses that promise opportunity. You know better. It's just another version of the same cage, built taller, with cleaner walls. The poor line up for work, hats in hand, and the city calls it dignity. The cycle reloads with the quiet efficiency of a well-practiced machine. At night, you pass a child asleep under a stoop, curled around a newspaper. The headline above his head reads, "The end of 5 points." You almost laugh. The headline is wrong, of course. The Bend didn't end, it multiplied. Every street with cracked pavement and low rent carries its DNA. Every alley that hums with noise and hunger is a descendant. The city didn't erase it, it franchised it. You look back toward the south, where the park gleams faintly under the moon, and for a second you swear you can see movement shadows dancing where grass grows now. The ghosts are restless. They always are, because cities don't forget. They just rearrange their sins and give them new postal codes. And somewhere north, as dawn begins to break, the same story starts again, waiting for someone else to call it progress. The park is quiet now, unnaturally so. You walk the clean path where the Bend once twisted and coughed, where the air used to vibrate with shouts and fiddles and the clang of 10,000 desperate dreams. Children chase pigeons across grass that shouldn't grow this well on ground that soaked up so much sorrow. The fountains gurgle like they're washing the memory away, but your mind refuses to follow. Beneath every polished stone, every tidy bench, you can still hear it, the rhythm that never died. It starts faint, like a whisper caught in the wind, the echo of a drum, a laugh, a curse, a song. It's not imagination, it's residue. The past doesn't vanish here, it ferments. You pause beside a lamppost and imagine what stood there a lifetime ago. A tenement, leaning against its neighbor for balance. Laundry strung between windows like surrender flags. The smell then would have been a blend of rot and stew and smoke, thick enough to chew. Now it's lilacs and hot pretzels. The air's lighter, but somehow thinner too. A couple strolls past, holding hands, talking about how peaceful the place feels. You almost want to tell them it wasn't always like this, that once, this was the beating heart of chaos, a symphony of noise and hunger that somehow made beauty out of misery. But you don't. They wouldn't believe you. Or worse, they'd smile politely, the way people do when confronted with history that makes them uncomfortable. You reach the old curve, the one the maps used to call the Bend, where the streets still remember the angle of despair. The city's bones may have shifted, but the ghost geometry remains. You close your eyes and it returns, the stomp of feet on wet cobblestone, the hiss of frying onions from a window, the sharp clatter of boots belonging to men with more swagger than money. The voices mix Irish, African, German, Italian, arguing, laughing, singing. They rise and fall like waves. You can almost see them, shadows dancing to a rhythm that hasn't stopped since it began. There's irony in the quiet perfection around you. The reformers got what they wanted. No crime, no filth, no scandal. But they also scrubbed out the fire that made this place pulse. The same soil that once birthed tap dance and rebellion now supports park benches and polite conversation. Even the wind seems domesticated, brushing your face like it's afraid to offend. You wonder if progress always sounds this quiet. You stop near a patch of trees planted exactly where the worst tenement once stood. A plaque sits nearby, polished and proud. Site of the former 5 Points neighborhood, redeveloped for the health and morality of the city. The words gleam in the sunlight, triumphant and slightly smug. You touch the metal, feel its chill, and think of the people whose stories never got plaques. The mothers who washed other people's clothes until their hands cracked. The kids who learned to dance because there was no room to stand still. The drunks who still found a way to sing. Somewhere beyond the trees, a street musician starts playing a fiddle. The sound floats over the park, thin but fearless. You turn toward it instinctively, heart kicking against your ribs, like it recognizes an old friend. It's not the same song. Not really, but it carries the same defiance. The notes are crooked, off-tempo, perfect. You catch yourself smiling, because the city can pave, build, and rename all it wants. But music is stubborn. It slips through cracks, hides in echoes, waits for the right moment to remind everyone what lived here first. As the sun dips behind the skyline, the park glows gold, soft and temporary. You look around and realize the ghosts aren't haunting anymore, they're humming. The rhythm of the old neighborhood lives under the lawns, under the stones, under every person who's ever walked this ground without knowing why it feels alive. The city keeps trying to bury 5 Points, but all it's really done is give it new acoustics. You take one last look at the curve of the path, at the trees swaying over buried streets, and for a heartbeat, you swear you see movement figures spinning in the dust, tapping out joy with their heels, laughing like the city still belongs to them. Maybe it always will, because you can clean the streets, rename the map, rewrite the story, but you can't silence the song still playing under your feet. You stand where it all began, though the street doesn't look like the one you remember. The curve of the bend is still there, but it's subtle now, softened by years and good intentions. The cobblestones are gone, paved smooth for tourists who don't know what they're walking on. The air smells like roasted coffee from a corner cafe, not like the stew of waste and whiskey that once coated every breath. Civilization, you think, looks best when it forgets how close it's always been to collapse. You pause beside a sleek building with glass walls that catch the afternoon sun. Somewhere under its foundation, the ghosts of the old tenements rest uneasily. You can almost hear them shifting, irritated by the weight of modernity pressing down. Every few years, a construction crew digging for new pipes turns up some reminder. A child's shoe, a rusted spoon, a coin so worn it's just the memory of money. They call it archaeology. The old residents would have called it Tuesday. People stroll by, laughing, carrying shopping bags. They have no idea they're walking through what was once the city's warning label. The newspapers used to say, 5 Points was proof that civilization could rot from the inside. Now the same space is advertised as historic, its past trimmed and polished until even misery seems marketable. There's irony in that, but it's the kind that tastes familiar. The city has always known how to turn pain into profit. You sit on a bench near the park. A saxophone hums from a busker down the path, notes sliding through the air like smoke. The tune isn't from here, not really, but you can hear the lineage, the rhythm borrowed from the alleys, the improvisation born of survival. Music doesn't forget. Even when the people do, it carries the fingerprint of every hand that ever clapped in, defiance, every foot that ever stamped to remind the earth they were still here. The city's heartbeat never stopped. It just learned a new tempo. You think about how the Bend began as a pond, filled in by people who thought they could bury a problem. When that didn't work, they built over it, then demolished it, then landscaped it. But the ground never stopped remembering. It still sags a little, just enough to remind the architects that no matter how straight they draw their lines, the earth prefers curves. It prefers honesty. A tour group passes. The guide gestures dramatically, reciting lines about the notorious slum that defined an era. The tourists gasp in all the right places, cameras clicking. You want to tell them it wasn't just vice and violence. It was laughter. Too ugly, loud, necessary laughter that made surviving another day possible. But history doesn't sell as well when it's complicated. The guide keeps talking, the crowd keeps walking, and the ghosts keep listening. You rise and wander toward the curve where the streets used to meet, that impossible intersection where cultures collided and refused to separate. The sun hits the bricks just right, and for a second, the shadows seem familiar. You can almost see the shapes of people long gone. A woman balancing laundry on her hip, a boy darting through the crowd, a drunk leaning on a lamppost and swearing at the moon. The vision blinks out as a car passes, honking impatiently. The world moves on. It always does. Still, you know better than to call this forgetting. The city remembers in ways it can't explain. It remembers through music, through rhythm, through the stubborn tilt of a building that refuses to stand straight. It remembers every time someone struggles, laughs too loud, or dances because they have nothing else left. Civilization, for all its polish, is fragile. It takes only a few bad decisions, a few unlucky breaks, to turn any bright corner back into 5 points. You take a deep breath, the air cleaner than it's ever been, and for the briefest moment, you swear you taste ash and gin and something almost holy. You smile. The city may have paved it over, renamed it, and sold it, but 5 points is still here. It always will be hiding in the cracks, humming beneath the noise, waiting for someone to listen closely enough to hear it again.